Hey everyone, welcome to our final review session. I know you've been grinding incredibly hard all semester, and I'm right here to help you completely ace this upcoming exam. Today, we're zoning in on Chapter 13. We're going to break down the absolutely essential foundational theories of employee motivation into a super clear, structured study guide. Whether you're just aiming for that A+, or you're actually getting ready to manage a real team out in the wild, understanding the psychological drivers behind human performance is, well, it's just critical. So grab your notes, get comfortable, and let's get you ready for test day. Here's the quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start off by defining exactly what motivation is, unpack Vroom's expectancy theory, scale Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then finally wrap up with equity theory. And we'll be tying in real-world applications so this material actually sticks in your brain.
Okay, Section 1, Defining Motivation. Let's lay down the absolute basics you need to know before we tackle the bigger models.
If a multiple-choice question pops up asking to define motivation, and trust me, it probably will, lock in these three elements: direction, effort, and persistence. These are the underlying psychological forces that explain exactly why people do what they do at work. Direction is all about the specific behaviors they actually choose to engage in. Effort is simply how hard they're hitting it. And persistence? This is a huge one. It's whether they keep pushing or just throw in the towel when they hit inevitable roadblocks. You literally need all three firing at once. Effort without direction is basically just wasted energy. Next, you'll definitely see an exam question contrasting intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is when you do the behavior just for the sheer joy of it. The work itself is the reward. Think of, say, a software developer who spends their weekend coding a new app just because they love solving puzzles. Extrinsic motivation, on the flip side, is behavior driven by acquiring material or social rewards, or avoiding punishment. That's the effort fueled by paychecks, job security, or, just the fear of your boss yelling at you. As a manager, you'll rarely rely on just one. Blending both is the real secret to unlocking peak performance and nailing those scenario-based exam questions. And this image right here beautifully illustrates the core flow we're studying today, the motivation equation. It's like a blueprint. Notice how it all starts over on the left with inputs from the team: their time, their effort, education, skills. Those inputs drive the actual performance, which boosts organizational efficiency. And ultimately, that performance leads to outcomes for the employee, like pay, job security, or just that great feeling of accomplishment. Literally every theory we discuss from here on out is just a different lens for explaining how this exact equation plays out in the human mind. Let's see how this builds into our first major framework. Section 2, Vroom's expectancy theory, straight out of the 1960s, looking at the cognitive mechanics inside that motivation equation. Victor Vroom essentially mapped out a highly specific three-step mental calculation that every single worker makes, whether they consciously realize it or not. They're constantly evaluating their effort, the resulting performance, and the final outcomes. Vroom argues motivation is only high when workers truly believe that high effort leads to high performance and that high performance actually leads to the outcomes they want. It is an unbreakable chain reaction. Definitely highlight these three definitions in your notes. They are pretty much guaranteed to be on the test. First, expectancy. That connects effort to performance. It's the internal belief of, hey, if I try hard, I can actually pull this off. Second is instrumentality. This connects performance to outcomes. It's the belief that if I perform well, they will actually give me the reward. And finally, valence. Valence is simply how desirable that final outcome is to the person. If the reward is a pair of movie tickets, but the employee absolutely hates going to the theater, well, the valence is zero. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here for your exam is this: high motivation only happens when all three factors, expectancy, instrumentality, and valence, are simultaneously high. Look at how they multiply together. If an employee thinks they can do the work, and they'd love the bonus, but they don't actually trust management to pay out that bonus, meaning instrumentality drops, their motivation just completely tanks. Every single link in this chain has to be strong. All right, Section 3. We're shifting gears entirely now. We are moving away from mental math and cognitive expectations into deep, intrinsic human requirements with need theories. Starting with the heavy hitter, Maslow. Abraham Maslow categorized human needs into 5 distinct levels. At the very foundation, we have basic physiological survival needs. This is where base pay comes in, just so a person can buy groceries and pay rent. Right above that are safety needs, like job security and health insurance. Then we move up to belongingness needs. That's your social interaction and good vibes with coworkers at the office. Next up are esteem needs, which get satisfied by things like promotions and recognition. And finally, at the very peak is self-actualization, where an employee is truly realizing their full potential and firing on all cylinders.
Now pay close attention to this, because it's a fundamental rule you've got to remember for the exam. How do these needs activate? Well, as a manager, you have to address the lowest unsatisfied need first. Maslow said that the lowest level of unmet needs is the primary motivator, and that only one level motivates at any given time. Once it's satisfied, it stops motivating. You can't motivate someone with an Employee of the Month plaque, which is an esteem need, if they aren't making enough to keep their lights on at home, which is a physiological need. Makes sense, right? Let's transition to our final core model for today, Section 4. We've talked about mental calculations and deep human needs. Now let's focus entirely on perception and relativity with equity theory. It really boils down to this foundational management question. What actually happens to a worker's drive and persistence when they look around the room and think, wait a second, I am not being treated fairly here? Up until now, everything we've talked about basically happens in a vacuum. But out in the real world, employees constantly compare themselves to each other. And that brings us straight to equity theory. Equity theory gives us the actual mathematical answer to that question. It says that equity, or true fairness, only exists when an employee perceives their personal ratio of outcomes over inputs as completely equal to a coworker's ratio. It's not just about what you get. It's about what you get relative to what you put in, compared directly to what the person at the next desk gets relative to what they put in. If those fractions balance out, the employee feels respected and motivation stays steady. Now make sure you can competently contrast the two types of inequity, maybe using the textbook's engineer example, because professors absolutely love testing on this. Underpayment inequity is when an engineer puts in way more sweat and longer hours than the guy sitting next to them, but takes home the exact same salary. That obviously destroys motivation. On the flip side, overpayment inequity is when that same engineer puts in the exact same effort as their coworker, but somehow gets the better assignments or a fatter paycheck. Now, you might think people love being overpaid, but equity theory suggests this actually creates intense psychological tension and guilt, which ironically can also totally disrupt motivation and team dynamics. As we close out this study guide, I want to leave you with a much bigger thought. Memorizing Vroom's equations, Maslow's pyramid, and the math behind equity theory, that is absolutely going to get you an A on this exam. That's step one. But the real test is out there in the actual professional world. When you're the manager, how are you going to use these frameworks to diagnose a struggling employee, structure a genuinely fair compensation plan, and truly empower your team? Keep that in the back of your mind as you review your notes tonight. Best of luck on the exam. You are absolutely going to crush it. I'll see you in the next explainer.